Imagine stepping off a wooden ship onto the edges of an uncharted continent, surrounded by ancient, whispering forests. Now, imagine returning to that exact shore 3 years later, only to find every home dismantled. No signs of struggle. No graves. No bones. Just a single, cryptic word carved into a wooden post, howling in the Atlantic wind. Croatoan. On August 18, 1590, John White, the governor of England's fledgling colony on Raleigh, it was his granddaughter's 3rd birthday, the child, Virginia Dare, who had been the very first English infant born in the New World. For 3 agonizing years, White had been stranded across the ocean, begging for ships to return to his family.
Now, as the smoke from a distant fire drifted above the tree line.
As he and his crew pushed past the wild briars and into the settlement, they found a ghost town. The heavy wooden palisade was still standing, but the cottages within had been carefully taken down. What White found carved into a wooden timber would launch America's most enduring historical mystery. A riddle that has baffled historians, archaeologists, and treasure hunters for more than 4 centuries. How does an entire colony of over 100 people vanish without leaving a single trace? To understand the fate of the lost settlers of Roanoke, we must journey back to the birth of a dangerous dream and the dark wilderness that swallowed it whole. In the late 16th century, England was a rising power looking across the vast Atlantic with hungry eyes. Spain had already conquered the gold-rich territories of the South, and Queen Elizabeth I was determined to secure her own slice of the Americas. The task fell to Sir Walter Raleigh, a wealthy courtier with grand ambitions. Raleigh envisioned a permanent English outpost that could serve both as a base for privateers raiding Spanish galleons and as the foundation of a new empire. The first attempts on Roanoke Island in 1585 were purely military, led by aggressive soldiers who viewed the land as a fortress. The military outpost quickly ran out of food. Tensions with the local Socotan and Algonquian tribes flared into violence, culminating in the realizing their position was untenable. Those first soldiers abandoned the island, fleeing back to England on a passing fleet. But Raleigh refused to let his dream die. In 1587, he tried a different approach. This would not be an army outpost. This would be a community. Raleigh assembled a group of 115 middle-class citizens, including 17 women and 9 children. To lead them, Raleigh chose John White, a talented artist and mapmaker who had accompanied the earlier expeditions. In May 1587, 3 ships set sail from Portsmouth, England, carrying the hopes of a new nation. The expedition was piloted by Simon Fernandes, a Portuguese navigator and privateer whose loyalty lay more with gold than with the settlers. As the ships stopped at Roanoke Island in July 1587 to check on a small detachment of 15 soldiers left behind he refused to let the colonists back onto the ships to continue their journey to the Chesapeake Bay. The 115 settlers were forced off the ships, dumped onto the sandy, windswept shores of Roanoke Island. When they walked into the abandoned military fort, they were greeted by a horrifying sight. The fort had been razed. In the tall grass, they found the bleached bones of one of the 15 soldiers left behind. The new colonists were now trapped in a graveyard, surrounded by indigenous peoples who had every reason to hate and fear the English. Despite the terror, they had to survive. Under Governor John White's leadership, they rebuilt the cottages and cleared the fields. In August, a spark of hope arrived. White's daughter, Eleanor, gave birth to a baby girl named Virginia, but the colony was already starving. The planting season had passed, and their supplies were dwindling rapidly. Desperate, the colonists begged John White to sail back to England to secure food, tools, and reinforcements. White was deeply torn. He did not want to leave his daughter, his newborn granddaughter, and his community behind in the wilderness. Before he boarded the ship, White made a pact with the settlers. If they had to leave Roanoke Island before he returned, and if they were forced to flee in distress, under attack from enemies, they were to carve a Maltese cross above the name. With that heavy agreement, White sailed east into the grey Atlantic, leaving his family on the edge of a wild continent.
When John White arrived in England in late 1587, he found a nation on the brink of catastrophe.
King Philip II of Spain had assembled the Spanish Armada, the largest invasion fleet the world had ever seen. In response, the Queen issued a desperate decree. Every English ship, regardless of size, was impounded for the defense of the realm.
White was utterly powerless. He watched as his promised relief ships were refitted with cannons to fight the Spanish.
Month after month, the war dragged on. White tried twice to slip away on small, inadequate relief ships. Back on Roanoke Island, the years bled together. Imagine the settlers standing on the dunes of the Outer Banks, staring at the empty horizon. One winter turned to 2, then 3. Their clothes wore thin. Their gunpowder grew damp. Every night, the darkness of the primeval forest crept closer. By 1590, the Spanish Armada had been defeated, and White finally secured passage on a privateering fleet heading to the West Indies. It was August 1590 when the ships finally anchored off the coast of Roanoke.
As the longboats pulled toward the shore, White saw smoke rising from the island.
But when they stepped ashore on August 18, his granddaughter's 3rd birthday, there was only silence. The scene John White found at Roanoke was not one of violent massacre, but of eerie, deliberate abandonment. The settlement had been fortified with a new wooden palisade, transforming it into a fort. But inside, all the houses had been carefully dismantled. Their heavy iron chests, which White had buried years before containing his books, maps, and personal belongings, had been dug up and looted. And then, White saw the post. Carved in clear, block letters into one of the entrance timbers of the palisade was, on a tree near the shore, the letters C-RO had been slashed into the bark.
White immediately looked for the distress signal. He searched the posts, the trees, and the surrounding timbers. There was no Maltese cross.
To White, the meaning was clear and brought an incredible sense of relief. Croatoan was the name of a nearby island, modern-day Hatteras Island, located about 50 miles to the south. White believed his family and the settlers had simply relocated to Croatoan Island to escape starvation and hostile tribes.
He immediately prepared to sail south to find them. But Roanoke had one last cruel trick to play.
A sudden, violent storm blew in from the Atlantic, the kind of fierce tempest that still ravels the Outer Banks today. The storm snapped the rescue ship's anchor cables. The crew lost their drinking water and ran dangerously low on food.
The captain, fearing the treacherous shoals, refused to search any further. Over White's desperate protest,
John White never found the funds or the ships to return to America. He died in Ireland, heartbroken, never knowing what became of his daughter and granddaughter. The settlers of Roanoke had vanished into the pages of myth. For more than 400 years, the fate of the Roanoke colonists has been shrouded in speculation, dark theories, and historical debate. The most terrifying theory suggests they were massacred.
Years after the disappearance, when the English finally established a successful colony at Jamestown in 1607, Captain John Smith began searching for clues. Smith claimed he was told by Chief Powhatan, the powerful leader of the Powhatan Confederacy, that his warriors had slaughtered the Roanoke colonists because they had allied with a rival tribe.
According to this account, the colonists had migrated north to the Chesapeake Bay, their original destination, where they lived peacefully for years. However, archaeologists have never found a single bone, burnt timber, or battlefield to support these claims of a mass slaughter. Another theory suggests the desperate colonists, tired of waiting for John White, built a makeshift boat from the timbers of their homes and attempted to sail back to England. But with no maritime experience and the treacherous currents of the Outer Banks, they would have been quickly swallowed by the Atlantic. For centuries, the mystery seemed completely unsolvable. until modern science and archaeology began digging into the sandy soil of North Carolina. In recent years, groundbreaking archaeological expeditions have completely rewritten the story of the lost colony, suggesting they were never truly lost at all. Led by organizations like the First Colony Foundation and local archaeologists, researchers have shifted their focus away from Roanoke.
First, they looked at Croatoan Island, now known as Hatteras Island.
Excavations led by archaeologist Mark Horton and researcher Scott Dawson have yielded staggering discoveries.
Buried deep in the sandy soil of Hatteras, alongside 16th century Native American pottery and tools, researchers uncovered unmistakably English artifacts. They found fragments of high-status European wine glasses, glass beads used for trade, writing styluses, and most importantly, buckets of hammer scale.
Hammer scale is a microscopic byproduct of ironworking. It is the metallic dust created when a blacksmith strikes hot iron with a hammer.
The indigenous populations of the Outer Banks did not have the technology to forge iron in the 1500s. This discovery provides undeniable physical proof that English artisans were living, working, and forging metal side by side with the Croatoan tribe.
Further inland, another breakthrough occurred.
In 2012, researchers at the British Museum examined an original map drawn by John White in 1585, called La Virginia Parse. Using modern X-ray imaging, they discovered a hidden patch of paper covering a symbol of a fort located 50 miles inland, at the mouth of the Chowan River. Archaeologists quickly descended on the area, naming it Site X. In the dirt, they found 16th century English borderware pottery, identical to the pottery used by the Roanoke settlers. The evidence suggests that the colony did not suffer a single, catastrophic end. Instead, they adapted to survive. Facing starvation and abandonment, the colonists likely split into smaller groups. One group traveled there. They did not perish. They integrated. They married into the local tribes, sharing their skills, their tools, and their lives. Oral histories from later centuries describe Native American communities in North Carolina, with members who possessed gray eyes. The lost colony of Roanoke was not destroyed by a curse or a massacre. It was saved by the humanity of the people who already called this continent home. The story of Roanoke is a haunting reminder of the sheer fragility of human ambition. It is a tale of a grand empire's failure. When the wilderness threatened to consume them, the settlers did not simply lay down and die. They adapted, let go of their old world, and merged with the new. Today, the wind still sweeps across the dunes of Roanoke Island, rustling the maritime pines where Eleanor Dare once walked.
The trees keep their secrets, but the soil has finally begun to speak.
And it tells us that those 115 souls did not vanish into thin air. They simply became American. If you want to continue exploring the hidden corridors of our world's greatest historical mysteries, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell.